each meet.
All right, I've got a chart up here, and I've got charts for each of you.
Can we have one across maybe here? And,
Yep,
I see two there. Are they duplicates or is one
they're
continuous?
duplicates.
Okay.
Actually, there's some slight differences. Mainly that
With duplicates.
I was in the middle of making these charts, so one of these copies is just slightly out of date. And I have written in pen some missing numbers. There are some more missing numbers, but you won't depend on them too much.
Is this what Stan wanted you to do?
Is this what Stan wanted me to do? I can't answer the question
He
because
wanted you to put it in a line.
Oh, in a line, yeah, which only works for short distances. When you have a scroll like this that's over 100 feet long, it doesn't work. Stretch from your front yard to your backyard. Okay. So this is what I call an overview of chronology, and it's just basically a brief summary of the major features, major time periods, eras, cycles,
When does it end?
and systems.
I don't see that.
Okay. So it's going to kind of give you a big picture of the overall chronology.
Oh, so yeah.
All right. Now, if you look, we have three sections in the chronology here. We have a section which shows pre-flood, right after the flood, and then the patriarchs. And then we have the period from Mount Sinai to Solomon's 4th year. And then we have a period of the kings of Israel, and then we have return from exile, coming down into the 1st century. So those are the major periods of biblical chronology, which are usually treated separately by chronologers. All right. If we look over here at the pre-flood here, we have Adam, and then piled on top, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. And that brings us up to the flood, what I've called the flood a deluge, because the word Mabul actually means an outpouring or deluge. The flood was 40 days and 40 nights upon the earth. And then after the flood we have our Faxad, Salah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and then Abraham, or Abram, okay? And then the three patriarchs of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, so this part of chronology from creation to Jacob was long ago solved by chronologers, okay? I have the same dates for Jacob as, say, Bishop Usher would have from the 16th century. And I didn't put Joseph in the chart because that's just an overview, but down to the death of Joseph, the same number of years from creation to the death of Joseph. Okay. I have a minor difference with Usher and just about every other chronologer on how the year of creation is counted, and how 2 years after the flood is counted, but those are internal differences and they actually cancel out, giving the same result. I could explain that briefly. For every child here, or descendant of Adam, we always have a birth year, which I have as a 0 year in the chronology. They're 1 year old after they lived a whole year, and then they get to be age 1 in the 2nd year of their life. Okay, well that, we should be consistent with Adam, and we should also give him a 1st year of life in which he's not age 1, it's his 0 year. In the 2nd year of his life, he's age 1. If you were to omit the 0 years from all of these, then Methuselah would end up dying after the flood. And we know he died before the flood. So we know that the chronicler used a 0 year for the birth year, and that they were age 1 after the birth year. So to be consistent, we have to put one in for Adam. Okay. So Usher and all other chronologers that I know of, Martin Amsey, David Cooper, Floyd Jones,
Okay.
all of those, they start year 1 of Adam with year 1 of the worlds. That's a mistake. All right, but they make up for the error because they make an error the other way at the flood. They add a year. So they omit a year here and they add a year here. Okay, and so the end result is by the time we get to the end of Joseph's or Jacob's life, that it's the same. Okay, deluge is important. It means outpouring. The flood or the deluge. The flood is not just the presence of waters. It's the outpouring of waters, which ceased after 40 days and 40 nights. The deluge was only 40 days and 40 nights. So this affects how you count for the birth of Arphaxad, who was born 2 years after the flood. If the deluge ended after 40 days and 40 nights, then the Arphaxad could be born 1 year sooner than if you run the flood out all the way a whole year to when Noah got off the ark. Okay? So the prevailing of the waters, or the presence of the waters, that's not the deluge. That's just the result of the deluge. The deluge is putting the waters on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, so Usher had a -1 error here and a +1 year error here. -1 and +1 equals 0. So by the time we get to the patriarchs, the error has disappeared. Okay? Now,
Did you say about Arphaxad a little while ago that something about there was a space of a year between Lamech and Arphaxad? They didn't.
Yeah, there's a space of about 2 years between Lamech and Arphaxad. Now I can't show this in this chart because this is an overview, and I've drawn this to scale as an engineering drawing. If you see,
2 years would be so insignificant on the chart.
if you look at in Adam here, it says scale 10 to 1. Okay, if you look at this box here, this column at the start, okay, which is the first year of the world. Okay, that's about an 1/8 inch thick. So that 1/8 inch represents 10 years.
Oh.
Okay, so what's a 1/10 of an 1/8? It's about 1/80th, I guess. And that's kind of hard to see, huh? We have a hard time seeing less than a 1/16 of an inch. So that's why you don't see any space there. Okay, here with Jacob, I've scaled it up to 3 to 1, where an 1/8 of an inch equals 3 years.
Oh.
Okay, and that's why Jacob looks longer than some, like Enoch over here. Well, he lived a lot less.
Dad, in that case, why is this block of 450 years longer than Adam's 930?
Well, if you look, okay, the scale over here on this part of the chart is 3 to 1.
Okay. Oh, okay.
The scale here, it says variable scale. Okay, which I just put it here for representation purposes. And over here it's 10 to 1. So all of these are 10 to 1, all of these are 10 to 1, 10 to 1 until we get to Jacob.
It's growing.
So the proportions are correct in this part of the chart over here. But then it's growing over here. And then it goes back to 3 to 1 for the rest of the chart. Otherwise the chart would be, well, it would stretch from here to your backyard. All right, and we don't want that to happen. It would be hard to explain it. Okay, now.
It would be an outdoor lesson.
Hmm?
It would be an outdoor lesson.
It would be an outdoor lesson, right.
That would actually be kind of cool. It's just
So, and here's an interesting feature, okay? Now, I'm going to explain different features, but if you see this dotted line right here, okay, it says synchronized Jubilee cycle on it. Okay, now if you're a Jubilee, you count 7 periods of 7 years, and then that equals 49 years. And then the 50th year after the 49th year is the year of Jubilee.
And do you start counting the next cycle on that 50th year or the next year after that?
On it. So the 50th year is equal to the first year of the next cycle.
Okay.
That way the 7-year cycles stay consistent. They don't wander. Okay?
Yeah, because they'd wander otherwise.
Right. It's like the weekly Sabbath. The weekly Sabbath keeps going 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. You don't, after you get to 50 days, you don't jump a day. All right? So so it can always stay on the 7th day. So it's the same way with the Jubilee period. You count 7 sabbatical cycles. The 50th year is a Jubilee, but then the 50th year also counts as the first year of the next cycle. So it's perfectly synchronized. So what I'm showing here is that when you get to 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine in the land of Egypt, which is this little box, you can see it on your chart over there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I drew the year of Jubilee at the end of the famine. Okay. Joseph bought all the land from the Egyptians, so they lost all of their land. Okay. Then in the year of Jubilee, he returned them to their land to them, on the condition that they pay a 20% tithe to Pharaoh of every year's produce. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is it's prototypical legislation for the Torah is what it is, because if you were to sell your land to someone else that you inherited, then in the year of Jubilee you would have it returned to you. And so this is what Joseph did with the Egyptians. They were dispossessed of all of their land. So however you lose your land, by debt or renting it or whatever, you can have it returned to you in the year of Jubilee. And who is the real owner of all the land?
The family.
No. God is the real owner of all the land. So we're just really tenants on his land. Okay.
Oh, they're making
So
it
in the eyes of the Egyptians, Pharaoh was what?
now. The owner.
The owner. Pharaoh was God in the eyes of the Egyptians, because they deified their kings. Okay. You may remember that, some of that from the Joseph movies. So then they pay 20%, which is 2 tithes to Pharaoh. Okay. Now in Israel, Yahweh, the God of Israel, instituted 2 tithes. Okay. The first 10% was paid to the Levites. The second 10% you used to make your annual pilgrimage and to pay for food expenses and stuff, and for priestly instruction for your family when you went to the feast days. And then in the third, so there's a so-called third tithe. In the third year of a cycle, actually in 2 of the years, in the third and the 6th years of the cycles, you spent the tithe on the poor, the Levite, the alien, the fatherless. Okay, so it's not really a third 10%. It's just using the second 10% for a different purpose than you used it in the other years. So they're really 2 tithes. So what I'm showing here, and this is true in Usher's chronology and everybody's chronology, that makes a chronology of this, okay? Because like I said, the +1, -1, +1 cancel out and they get the same results. So in Usher's chronology, Ansie's chronology, Floyd Jones's chronology, after the 7 years of famine, the return of the land synchronizes with the Jubilee from creation. Okay? Alright. Now, where chronologies start to diverge and do something different, okay, is...
Different.
Yeah. They start to mess things up here.
Joshua's long day.
We have, no, it's not Joshua's long day. Joshua's long day only messes up astronomical calculations before Joshua's long day. Okay. The scripture records astronomical data before Joshua's long day by which we could calculate, but it doesn't do any calculations. So there's nothing to mess up.
That makes sense.
Okay.
That was like
Alright, if you see this 400 years here, okay, this represents the 400 years. This is one of the long eras of scriptures. This represents the 400 years that's in Genesis 15:13. Good idea to read that. Okay.
Genesis 13, 15.
15:13.
15, 13.
Genesis 15:13.
What time is it, Mommy?
Then Yahweh said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring, your seed, will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants, and they will be afflicted 400 years. And they will be afflicted, 400 years. Okay. A lot of interpreters read the text superficially and they say, okay, aha, that means 400 years in Egypt. However, Christian chronologers and Jewish chronologers have not seen it that way. And the reason is because we are given the age of Jacob's sons Levi, and then we're given the age of his son Kohath, and the age of his son Kohath's son Amram, and the age of Moses. Okay, and also it says in the prophecy here, it says they will come out in the 4th generation. Can't remember the verse name or number right now, but Jacob was the 1st generation to enter into Egypt, and then we have Levi was the 2nd generation, and then you have to trace the line through Jochebed, which is Moses' mother. She was the daughter of Levi, and then you get to Moses. So that's 4 generations. Jacob, Levi, Jochebed, Moses, 4 generations. Okay, so when you add up the ages of Jacob and Levi and Moses, you find that there's not enough for 400 years. There's only enough for about 350 years. And that's assuming that one died and the other was born, which is an impossibility. Okay. Levi, of course, has to be born while Jacob is still alive, and Jochebed has to be born while Levi is still alive, and so on. So when it says your seed will be, the operative, the first part of the verse is in 15:13. Know for certain your seed will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. Okay, that's the criteria. Being a stranger in a land that's not there, and it's Abraham's seed, not
I
Abraham.
take it that's the country of Egypt?
No, it's just a land that's not theirs. Okay, they weren't given Canaan yet. They were only promised Canaan. Okay, so they were strangers in Canaan. They were strangers in Egypt also. All right, so the key to operating here is not that they were afflicted and not that they were enslaved. That was episodic. Okay, there was an episodic affliction from Ishmael. There was episodic affliction from Abimelech, and also Abraham visited Egypt before that, but Isaac also made a visit to Egypt. Okay, and the Egyptians they came out on the rotten. Did Isaac go to Egypt? Remember?
No.
No. Okay, he kept out of Egypt. There were 2 episodes to Abimelech. That's right, one with Abraham and one with Isaac. Okay, so Abimelech almost lost everything because he took Rebekah, Isaac's wife.
Pretty sure he did.
And then when they went down to Egypt, they were given the best of the land of Egypt until all the 12 sons died. Until after the death of Joseph. So they actually prospered greatly in Egypt, and they weren't enslaved at the time, first part of being in Egypt. It's only at the end they were enslaved. So the affliction of slavery was episodic. The condition that prevailed for the whole time was that they were strangers in a land that's not theirs. I'm spending so much time on this because this is where Christian interpreters make a mistake. They make it 400 years. Okay. Christian chronologers and Jewish chronologers, however, don't make this mistake. They realize that the 400 years dates from the birth of Isaac, which is when the promised seed was born. So we synchronize the 400 years with the birth of Isaac. Now, if you look at the beginning of the 400-year era, I have something labeled 30 years there. Okay. There's another long number in the book of Exodus, which is 430 years. The sojourning of the sons of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. Okay. We have to realize the dwelling in Egypt is not 430 years. The sojourning of the sons of Israel who, put a parenthesis there, dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. So the question is, when did the sojourning begin? Okay. The sojourning began when Abraham left Ur of the Chaldees. So if you look back here at the beginning of the 30 years, you'll see it overlaps the end of Terah's life. Just a little bit. Actually overlaps the end of Terah's life by 5 years. And this is because Abraham left Haran after his father died. Okay, that's in the book of Acts. When he was age 75. So Terah lived 205 years, and Abraham was 75 years and then he left. Okay, so between the birth of Isaac and leaving Haran was 25 years, because he was 100 when he bore Isaac. So 100 minus 7 is 25 years. So we needed 30 years on the beginning of the 400 years. Okay, so that means 5 years before they left Haran, they left Ur. All right, and that's how God appeared to Abraham in the land of the Chaldees, in Ur of the Chaldees. He didn't appear to him in Haran. And for some reason, and the probable reason that they settled in Haran and stopped going to Canaan was because the call was originally given to Abraham in Ur. And his father, which we learn from the book of Joshua, was an idolater. And his father Terah worshipped many gods. So when the God of Israel appears to Abraham, Terah's likely reaction is, this is one more God. But since my son had a vision of him, maybe I should listen to the message of this one more God. And so his father Terah was willing to go along with him. So they got up and they went to Haran. But for whatever reason, for trials along the way, or conflicting messages, Terah didn't really have faith and they stopped in Haran. Okay, and Abraham, respect for his father, or his father was very elderly, stopped with him. Okay, so in Genesis 12:4, the God of Israel has to repeat the call to Abraham. Okay, and say, now you can come out and go to Canaan. Okay, so this is why there's a 400 years and a 30 years, or a 430 years, but he was only 25 years in the land before he begat Isaac. So there's 5 years between Ur and Haran. The Jewish interpreters actually time the 400 years correctly. They begin from the birth of Isaac. The Christian interpreters get it correct that Abraham left Haran when his father died at 205, age 75.